My name is Maya Brennan. I am 32 years old, and for the last 8 years, my family has believed I spend my days filing insurance paperwork in a beige cubicle somewhere in downtown Chicago. My brother calls me a paper pusher. My mother calls me the practical one, which in our family is a polite way of saying the one who didn't amount to much. And my father, well, my father hasn't called me anything in about 3 years because we don't really talk anymore. What none of them know is that 2 weeks ago, I was standing in an operating room at Johns Hopkins Hospital with a medical resident on each side of me, a scrub nurse counting instruments behind me, and a 9-hour craniotomy ahead of me. The patient on the table was a 47-year-old federal judge with a grade 4 glioblastoma wrapped around his brainstem like a fist. His family had been told by 2 other surgeons that it was inoperable. I told them I would try. He walked out of the hospital 11 days later. But tonight, I am standing at the door of my parents' house in Naperville, Illinois, holding a bottle of wine I bought at a gas station because I forgot to stop somewhere better, wearing a coat with a loose button, and I can already hear my brother laughing inside. I rang the doorbell even though I have a key. I always ring the doorbell at this house. It feels more honest somehow. The door swung open, and there was my mother, already dressed for the occasion in a silk blouse, her reading glasses pushed up on her head. She looked at me the way she always does, starting at my shoes and ending somewhere around my hairline. A quick, invisible inventory of everything slightly wrong. "Maya, your coat," she said, instead of hello. "I know," I said. "The button. I'll sew it for you. Come in. Your brother is already here." He brought Adrienne. Adriana is my sister-in-law. She has her own lifestyle brand with 400,000 Instagram followers, and she signs her texts with a lowercase a like a poet. I have nothing against her personally. She just makes me feel like a houseplant that hasn't been watered. Inside, the house smelled of garlic and my father's cologne. The television in the living room was playing at the volume my father needs now that he refuses to admit his hearing has changed. My nephew Marcus, 7 years old and already possessing my brother's talent for ignoring people he finds uninteresting, was sitting cross-legged on the carpet destroying something with a remote control. "Aunt Maya," he said, without looking up. "Hey, buddy," he said nothing else. I took off my coat. My brother came around the corner from the kitchen holding a glass of red wine that was definitely not from a gas station. Daniel Brennan is 38, 2 inches taller than me, and has the particular energy of a man who has been told he is exceptional so many times that he has simply accepted it as geological fact. He is handsome in a way that photographs well. He runs a real estate development firm that has broken ground on 3 luxury residential towers in the last 4 years. My parents talk about those towers the way some people talk about their grandchildren. "Hey, there she is," Daniel said, spreading his arms. "The medical biller? That is what they call my job. Medical biller." I told them that 8 years ago when I came home for Christmas and couldn't explain the truth. Not yet, not the full weight of it, and the lie was easier in the moment and then it calcified. Medical biller. Someone who types numbers into spreadsheets so insurance companies know how much to deny. "Hey, Daniel," I said, and accepted the hug. He patted me on the back twice, the way you pat a dog when you want it to go lie down somewhere. We sat down to dinner 20 minutes later. My mother had made pot roast and roasted vegetables and the good rolls that she only makes when Daniel comes home, though she would never say it that way. She would say she makes them whenever she has the time. The time is always there when Daniel visits. My father sat at the head of the table. He looked older than the last time I saw him, which was 11 months ago at Thanksgiving. His hair had gone fully gray since then, and there was something careful about the way he moved, like a man who has started listening to his body for the first time after decades of ignoring it. "James," my mother called him. "Come sit." He came. He looked at me and nodded once. The way you nod at a neighbor you recognize, but don't know. "Hi, Dad." "Maya." He sat down. "How's work?" It was not really a question. It had the shape of one but no actual curiosity inside it. "Good," I said. "Busy." "Billing season?" Daniel said, and smiled at his own joke. Adrienne touched her napkin to her lips to hide that she was smiling too. My mother began serving. She gave Daniel the largest portion of the roast, the center cut, the part with the most caramelized edge. She gave my father the second best piece. She gave Adrienne a smaller portion and apologized for the richness, because Adrienne had once mentioned she was watching her sodium. She gave Marcus the roll he asked for, torn into 4 pieces. She gave me the end cut, the part that had been sitting closest to the edge of the pan, drier than the rest, slightly overdone. She set it down in front of me without comment and moved back to the kitchen for the gravy, which she brought out and placed closer to Daniel's side of the table. I looked at my plate. I have eaten nutrition bars in hospital break rooms at 3 a.m. after standing for 11 straight hours, and they tasted like victory. The dry pot roast would be fine. So, my father said, picking up his fork, Daniel, tell us about the project. Daniel leaned back in his chair slightly, the posture of a man settling in to give a speech he has been waiting to give. Riverview Phase 3 is going to break ground in March. We finalized the financing last week, 240 units. Rooftop amenity deck. The city council approved the variance we needed, which, honestly, was the last real obstacle. My mother pressed both hands to her chest. Oh, Daniel. It's a big one, he agreed modestly, in the way of a man who does not actually feel modest. That's wonderful, Adrian said. She had heard this before. She said it the way wives say things they have heard before, warmly and without surprise. My father shook Daniel's hand across the table, actually reached across the pot roast and shook his son's hand. That's my boy, he said. That is my boy. I watched the handshake. I thought about the last time I operated on a patient that 3 other surgeons had turned away. I thought about the resident who had cried in the scrub room afterward. Not from sadness, but from the specific relief of watching something impossible become possible. I thought about the email from the chief of neurosurgery that I had received that same evening with the subject line that just said, Brennan. Exceptional work. I cut into my dry pot roast. Maya, my mother said, and I looked up with a reflex kind of hope, the hope that is trained into you by years of waiting for your name to mean something good in a room. Did you remember to bring the form I asked you about? The explanation of benefits for Dad's last procedure? Of course, the form. She had texted me 3 weeks ago asking if I could look over a billing document because, after all, I worked in medical billing, so I must understand these things. I had looked at it in 30 seconds and seen immediately that the hospital had undercoded a procedure and my father was being overcharged by about $2,400. I had made a single phone call to the billing department, cited the correct CPT code, and the charge had been corrected within 48 hours. I had not told them how I knew what to say. I had not told them why the billing department had corrected it so quickly once I identified myself. I had just told my mother the problem was fixed. I don't have a physical copy, I said. But it's handled. The charge is corrected. Oh, she looked slightly disappointed. I wanted to show it to Daniel. He's been dealing with some contractor billing issues, and I thought maybe you could— I'll look at it, Daniel said, waving a hand. I have a guy for that stuff. Don't worry about it, Mom. So the problem I had already solved, in 48 hours, with a single call, using knowledge that took 8 years of medical training and 3 years of a surgical residency to acquire, was replaced in my mother's mind within about 10 seconds by the news that Daniel had a guy for that stuff. I drank some water. After dinner, Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled to a real estate listing and held it across the table toward my parents. It was a condominium on the 34th floor of a building in Lincoln Park. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Professionally staged photographs. The kind of place where the kitchen island is larger than some studio apartments. Early anniversary present, he said. I know it's 3 months out, but the unit won't be available later. I put a deposit down yesterday. My mother made a sound I don't have a word for. My father stood up. He stood up from the dinner table to shake Daniel's hand again, and then he pulled him into a hug, and I watched my father's face over Daniel's shoulder, this expression of complete, full-hearted pride, and I felt something in my chest do the thing it always does in this house, that slow, quiet implosion, like a building being demolished from the inside without any visible smoke. Daniel sat back down. He looked at me with the specific look of a man who is about to demonstrate generosity. Oh, and hey, Maya. I want to help you out too. He reached into his jacket pocket and put a folded piece of paper on the table, sliding it toward me. I know things are tight on a billing salary. I called in a favor with a property manager I know. There's a 1-bedroom opening up in Bridgeport in February. Rent-controlled, ground floor. It's not glamorous, but it's practical. I told him you'd probably be interested. I looked at the folded paper. Ground floor, Bridgeport. Practical. My mother nodded encouragingly. It's close to the bus line, Maya. That makes sense for your commute. I live in Baltimore, I said. Well, if you ever wanted to move back closer to home, she said, it wouldn't hurt to have options. I looked at the paper. I thought about my apartment in Baltimore, which occupies the top floor of a brownstone 2 miles from the hospital. I thought about the morning light in my kitchen and the reading chair by the window where I sit with surgical journals on Sunday mornings. I thought about the fact that I own it, that I bought it 4 years ago with my own money, that the view from the living room window is the kind of view that makes you feel, briefly, that the world is a manageable place. I did not say any of that. Thank you, I said, and folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Daniel smiled the smile of a man who has done his charitable duty. I helped clear the table. I washed 3 pots. I loaded the dishwasher while Daniel sat on the couch with my father, and they watched something on television and laughed together, and the sound traveled into the kitchen like radio signals from a country I had never been given citizenship in. I drove back to my hotel, because I stay in hotels when I visit this house, have for 4 years, because it makes the visits possible in a way they would not otherwise be. I sat on the edge of the bed. I did not cry. I haven't cried about this specific thing in a long time. What I felt was something quieter and more permanent than crying. The feeling of a fact you have accepted, but not yet stopped noticing. I opened my laptop. There was an email from Dr. Carol Whitfield, the chief of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. The subject line said, Confirmation March Symposium. I had been asked to deliver the keynote address at the American Association of Neurological Surgeons annual symposium in March, in Chicago. I had not told my family I was coming to Chicago for the symposium. I had told them I was visiting for a few days because I had work in the area. Which was true, just not the full shape of the truth. I accepted the invitation and closed the laptop and went to sleep. Here is what I should tell you about the reason I never corrected the lie. When I was 24 and finishing my last year of medical school, I came home for Christmas and my mother asked me at dinner how my studies were going, and I said I was going to apply for a neurosurgery residency, and my father put his fork down and looked at me with an expression I had not seen before, a kind of exhausted preemptive disappointment, and said, Maya, neurosurgery that's not a realistic path for everyone. Not everyone has the aptitude for that specialty. Have you talked to anyone about other options? Something more manageable? He did not say I was not smart enough. He did not say girls don't do that. He said manageable. As if the ceiling above me were a fixed architectural feature of the house, and not a thing I could choose to walk out of entirely. I got the residency. I finished at the top of my class. I published 4 papers in my first 2 years of practice. I received my board certification with a score that the examining committee noted in writing. I built a career that by any objective measure was, in fact, exceptional. And every time I came home, I looked at my father's face across the dinner table and I thought about saying, You were wrong. I need you to know you were wrong. This thing you told me I couldn't manage, I have managed it beyond what you imagined was possible. And every time I said nothing, because wanting that acknowledgement felt like a weakness I couldn't afford, because needing them to see me felt like handing them a power I had spent 8 years learning to take back. So I became a medical biller in this house. And I carried it like a stone in my pocket, smooth and heavy, and privately mine. 3 weeks later, I was in the prep room outside Surgical Suite 4 at Johns Hopkins, gloving up, when my phone buzzed on the counter. My personal phone, not the hospital pager. I looked at the screen. It was a text from Daniel. A long one. Hey, so the symposium thing. I Googled it. There's a dinner the night before at the Langham. Adrian wants to go. I'm putting together a table for clients, and I thought it might actually be good networking for her brand partnership stuff. I know you're in Chicago for work that week anyway, the billing conference or whatever, so any chance you could help with the coordination? Like logistics, making sure the table is set up right, that kind of thing. You're good at organizing, and honestly, it would just be easier to have someone there who knows the space. Let me know. Also, can you get us access to the VIP reception? I heard there's one. Just ask whoever is running the event. I read it twice. I was about to go into a 7-hour spinal tumor resection. The patient was a 29-year-old elementary school teacher from Annapolis named Corinne, who had 3 children and had been told 6 months ago that the tumor in her cervical spine would eventually take away her ability to walk. She had driven 3 hours to see me because someone told her I was the one to ask. My brother wanted me to arrange his seating chart and get him into the VIP reception. I set the phone face down on the counter. Dr. Brennan? My resident, a third year named Patel, was already at the door. Ready, I said. We went in. The symposium was held on a Friday in March at the Hyatt Regency in downtown Chicago. The conference center on the third floor had been transformed into something that felt, as these rooms always do, simultaneously corporate and reverent, the particular atmosphere of a gathering of people who take their work very seriously and are most comfortable among others who understand why. I had arrived the night before and checked into the hotel using a reservation made by the symposium committee, which had covered travel and accommodation as part of the keynote speaker arrangement. I had not told my family which hotel. I had not told them which event. I had told them I would see them for dinner Saturday. The morning of the symposium, I got dressed in my hotel room. I put on the suit I had bought in New York 6 months ago for exactly this kind of occasion, a dark charcoal with a clean line, the kind of suit that does not apologize for itself. I put on the earrings my residency supervisor had given me when I got my board certification. Small gold ones. Understated. I looked in the mirror and I thought, this is who I actually am. This is the person who exists outside of that house. The morning sessions were excellent. I sat in the front row for a presentation on emerging techniques in laser interstitial thermal therapy and asked 2 questions that led to a 10-minute side conversation with the presenting surgeon after the session. I had coffee with Dr. Whitfield and 2 other senior neurosurgeons whose work I had read since I was a resident, people whose names appeared in the textbooks I had studied, and we talked for an hour about a collaborative research proposal that Dr. Whitfield was putting together. I was not a medical biller in that room. At 2 p.m., I was introduced. Our keynote speaker this afternoon, Dr. Whitfield said from the podium, was completing her chief residency when her first published paper on cortical mapping received a citation in the New England Journal of Medicine. She has since performed over 340 complex cranial and spinal surgeries with an outcome record that I will simply describe as among the best in the country. She has been named to the journal's top surgeons list for 3 consecutive years. She is, in the opinion of many people in this room, including myself, one of the finest neurosurgeons practicing in the United States today. Please welcome Dr. Maya Brennan. I walked to the podium. The room held 340 people. Every seat was full. I did not think about my family. I did not think about the dry pot roast or the ground floor apartment in Bridgeport or the folded piece of paper I had left on the nightstand in my hotel room the morning I checked out in November. I thought about Corinne, the 9-year-old teacher, who had sent me a video 2 weeks ago of herself walking her kids to the school bus. I thought about what it means to do something that cannot be undone in the best possible way. I thought about all of it and I began to speak. I do not know exactly when my brother arrived at the symposium. I found out later that he had seen the event listed online while researching the Langham dinner, which was a separate private event for a different medical organization and not connected to this symposium at all, something I had not bothered to clarify in my non-reply to his text. He had apparently decided to come anyway, perhaps hoping the VIP reception was still available, perhaps just because Daniel Brennan does not generally require an invitation to enter a room. What I know is that I was about 20 minutes into my address, describing the neurological mapping process I used during awake craniotomies, when movement near the back of the room caught my eye. A man in a suit too expensive for the room, not because neurosurgeons don't wear expensive suits, but because his had the particular self-consciousness of someone dressed for a different audience. He was scanning the crowd. He was looking for something, or someone. He looked up toward the podium. He found me. I watched my brother's face from 50 feet away as his brain processed what his eyes were showing him. I kept speaking. The woman at the podium, in the charcoal suit, under the spotlight, with the academic credentials on the projection screen behind her, with 340 surgeons in seated attention in front of her, was his sister, the medical biller, the one with the loose button on her coat, the one who got the end cut of the pot roast. Daniel sat down slowly, in an empty seat near the back. I did not stop speaking. I finished the address. I described the research proposal Dr. Whitfield and I were developing. I talked about where I thought the field was going in the next 10 years. I do one. I said the things I had come to say. I was not performing. I was not making a point. I was doing the work I had come there to do. And I happened to know that my brother was watching, and I decided that this did not change anything at all. When I finished, the room applauded. I thanked them. I stepped back from the podium. Dr. Whitfield shook my hand. The two senior surgeons from the coffee conversation came forward. The symposium coordinator touched my arm to guide me toward a photograph that needed to be taken for the association's publication. I did not look for Daniel. He found me 40 minutes later, in the hallway outside the conference room, where I was standing with a cup of coffee and a small group of residents who had asked follow-up questions about the mapping presentation. He waited, not patiently, slightly to the side, the way a person waits when they have something urgent to say and are unaccustomed to waiting. When the residents moved on, he stepped forward. Maya, his voice was different. Not the dinner table voice, not the voice that said medical biller with the particular music of someone reciting a fact they find faintly embarrassing. This was a smaller voice, a recalibrating voice. Hi, Daniel. I didn't, he stopped. He looked at the lanyard around my neck. Keynote speaker. He looked at the program guide he was still holding, which had my photograph on the inside cover under the heading, Dr. Maya Brennan, MD, FANS, Chief of Cerebrovascular Surgery, Johns Hopkins Hospital. You're a surgeon. Yes. A neurosurgeon. Yes. He looked at the program for another moment, as though rereading it might cause it to say something different. For how long? He said. 8 years in practice. 12, including training. He calculated. His face did the math against the years of dinners, the jokes, the ground floor apartment, the Christmas when he had given me a gift card to a grocery store and called it practical. 12 years. The entire span of his real estate career, which our father had toasted at 3 separate dinners that I had attended and smiled through. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at him. I thought about giving him the gentle answer, the careful answer, the one that redistributes the responsibility so that no one person holds too much of it. I thought about all the times I had given that version of the answer to myself, in hotel rooms and hospital parking garages and on long drives back from Naperville, the version where the lie was mostly practical and only a little bit about pain. But I was tired, and we were in a hallway, and there were 340 neurosurgeons on the other side of the wall who had just listened to me speak for 40 minutes, and I didn't feel like measuring my words anymore, because every time I came home I said, I was the problem. I was the one who didn't quite fit. And I figured out somewhere along the way that if I told you the truth, one of two things would happen. Either you wouldn't believe me, or you would believe me and suddenly start treating me differently, and I would spend the rest of my life wondering which version of the attention was real. Daniel was quiet. The dry pot roast is fine, I said. I've eaten worse things in worse places, but I am not a medical biller. I have not been a medical biller for a very long time. And Dad's medical bill got fixed because I know every CPT code for every neurosurgical procedure that hospital performs, because I perform those procedures, not because I type them into a spreadsheet. He looked at the floor. I watched him, my brother, and I tried to find anger and discovered that it was not really there anymore. What was there instead was something sadder and more honest than anger, a kind of grief for the relationship we had not been able to have because both of us had been too busy playing the roles we had been assigned to look at each other clearly. I was jealous of you, he said, quietly. To the floor. I know. Not if I didn't even know about the he gestured toward the conference room. I was jealous because you always seemed like you didn't need any of it. The approval. You seemed like you could just leave and be fine. I wasn't fine, I said. I just got good at it. He looked up. I'm sorry, Maya. I believed him. I believed him because his voice had lost its architecture, the careful, constructed resonance of a man who is used to being heard, and what was underneath it was just a person, a little smaller than his suits suggested, a little more uncertain than his towers implied. I know, I said again. I did not tell him it was okay. It was not okay. Not exactly. Not yet. But it was true that I forgave him, not because he had earned it, and not because the apology had been sufficient, but because I had been carrying the weight of that unforgiveness for a long time and I was a surgeon and I understood, perhaps better than most people, the physical cost of things you carry in your body that have nowhere to go. I let it go, not loudly, not dramatically. Just the way you release a held breath in a room where you have finally been allowed to breathe. Tell Mom and Dad, I said. That's on you now. I'm not going to keep managing this for all 3 of you. He nodded. I picked up my coffee cup. I have a dinner with the symposium committee tonight. I'll see you Saturday. I walked back toward the conference room. Behind me, I heard Daniel exhale, long and slow, the sound of a person who has just understood something that cannot be ununderstood. I did not turn around. On Saturday, I had dinner with my family at a restaurant my mother had chosen, somewhere with white tablecloths and a bread basket and the particular formality families adopt when they are trying to behave differently than usual. My parents already knew. Daniel had called them the night before. I could see it in the way my mother looked at me when I walked in. Not the inventory look, not the shoes to hairline assessment, but something more careful, like she was trying to recalculate from a new starting point and finding the arithmetic harder than she expected. My father stood up when I came to the table. He stood up the way he had stood up to shake Daniel's hand over the pot roast. And I stopped walking for just a second, because I did not know what to do with that. Maya, he said. He didn't have anything else ready. Just my name, but said differently. I sat down. We ordered. My mother asked me real questions for the first time in years. Questions with actual curiosity in them. About the surgery. About the hospital. About what it felt like to do what I did. I answered them honestly. It felt strange. And also, underneath the strangeness, quietly good, the way it feels to finally put down something you have been carrying so long you forgot it was optional. My father asked about the patient who had walked out of the hospital. He had heard the story from Daniel, and he wanted to hear it from me. So I told him about the 9 hours and the margin of tissue no thicker than 2 millimeters, and the moment when the monitor showed the tumor margin clear, and the resident next to me had to step back and compose herself. I told him about Corinne's video, the kids at the bus stop. My father listened to the whole thing without looking away. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I told you it wasn't a realistic path. Yes, I said. You did. I was wrong, he said. He did not dress it up. He did not add qualifications or context or the word but. He just said it, plainly, across the breadbasket. It was not everything. It did not repair 12 years in a single sentence. But it was a real thing, said in a real voice, and I accepted it the way you accept something imperfect that is nonetheless genuinely offered. Thank you, Dad. He nodded and picked up his menu and pretended to study it, and I could see the back of his neck go slightly red the way it does when he is feeling something he doesn't have the vocabulary for. I let him have the menu. I have done surgery on the brain for 8 years. I know that the most delicate work is not always done under theater lights. That night I drove to the lake. I parked and walked down to the waterline and stood there with the Chicago wind doing what Chicago wind does in March, which is remind you that it exists with significant personal force. The water was dark, and the city was behind me, and I thought about who I was at 24, standing in my parents' kitchen saying the word neurosurgery and watching my father's face go careful. I thought about all the years of saying medical billing and feeling the specific small erosion of it. I thought about Corinne walking her kids to the school bus, and the resident crying in the scrub room and Dr. Whitfield's email and the 340 people in that room who had applauded not for my name, but for the work. I thought about my brother sitting down slowly in the back of that conference room. I reached into my pocket. The piece of paper was still there. Daniel's note about the ground floor apartment in Bridgeport. Practical. Close to the bus line. I had carried it for months. I'm not sure why. Perhaps because there is a version of yourself that lives in the people who love you and doesn't always resemble the version you actually are, and sometimes you carry the evidence of that gap around with you just to remind yourself it exists. I unfolded it. I looked at it one more time. Then I folded it back into a small square and placed it carefully in the recycling bin near the parking lot. I walked back to the car. I had an early flight to Baltimore in the morning. I had a Monday surgery, a 16-year-old with a brainstem cavernoma that her mother had described over the phone as a death sentence, and that I had privately, carefully, decided it was not. I had a resident who needed feedback on a pre-op report. I had a research call with Dr. Whitfield on Tuesday and a journal submission due by the end of the month. I had a life, fully built, waiting for me 800 miles east. I started the car, the city lights reflected in the rearview mirror, and then fell away as I pulled onto the road, and I did not feel like a person driving away from something. I felt like a person driving towards something, which is a different feeling entirely, and one I plan to keep, If you have ever been the one in your family who did the quiet, impossible thing while everyone else got the applause, I want you to know something. The work counts whether or not they see it. The life you built is real whether or not they know the square footage. And the day they finally understand what you have been doing all this time, you will not need their admiration the way you once thought you would. You will already be somewhere else. You will already be driving home.